What if one act of kindness could change your entire life? What if the person you helped today turned out to be the key to your future? This is the story of Aisha, a poor waitress who defended an elderly man being humiliated, not knowing he was the father of a billionaire CEO. But what happens when the truth is revealed? And what about the cruel woman who mistreated him? Keep watching, because this story will leave you speechless. Aisha wiped her forehead with the back of her hand, her thin uniform clinging to her as she rushed between tables, serving plates of steaming food. The small, bustling restaurant in the heart of Lagos was always packed, filled with customers looking for a quick meal after work. She had been working here for almost a year, but every day still felt like a battle. The pay was small, barely enough to cover her rent in the one-room apartment she shared with her sick mother. But Aisha wasn't one to complain. She had dreams of one day becoming a businesswoman, of lifting her mother out of poverty. Table 5 is still waiting for their food, Madame Ronke, her boss, barked. Move faster, Aisha, you're too slow. I'm coming, Ma, Aisha responded quickly, grabbing a tray of jollof rice and grilled chicken. She moved swiftly, serving customers with a warm smile, despite the exhaustion that weighed her down. Just as Aisha placed the last plate on the table, the small bell above the door jingled, signaling a new customer. An elderly man walked in slowly, his clothes simple but neat, his worn-out slippers tapping against the tiled floor. His face was tired, his silver beard neatly trimmed, and he carried himself with quiet dignity. He looked around, scanning for an empty seat. Some customers turned to stare, whispering among themselves. "Who let this old man in?" one of them sneered. "Maybe he's lost," another laughed. Aisha watched as the old man approached the counter. He reached into his pocket and brought out a few crumpled naira notes. "I'd like a plate of rice, please," he said in a soft, tired voice. Madame Ronke, standing behind the counter, looked at him with disgust. She folded her arms. "We don't serve beggars here," she spat. The restaurant went silent. Some customers chuckled, others shook their heads. Aisha felt a pang of anger. She stepped forward before she could stop herself. "Madam, he's not a beggar," Aisha said, her voice steady but firm. Madame Ronke turned to her sharply. "Did I ask for your opinion?" Aisha didn't back down. "He has money. He wants to buy food like everyone else." The old man looked at her, surprise flashing in his tired eyes. He had expected humiliation, but kindness? That was rare. Madame Ronke scoffed. "Do you think I care? I don't want dirty old men in my restaurant." Aisha felt her anger rise, but she forced herself to stay calm. "If he can pay, he has a right to eat here." The old man sighed. "It's okay, my daughter. I will go." "No, sir, please sit," Aisha said quickly. She turned and walked to the counter, reaching into her apron pocket. She didn't have much, but she took out her own money and paid for his meal. The restaurant went quiet again. The customers watched, some amused, some surprised. Madame Ronke laughed coldly. "You want to waste your money on him? Fine. But don't cry when I cut it from your salary." Aisha didn't care. She brought the old man a plate of hot rice and chicken, placing it gently in front of him. "Eat well, sir," she said with a smile. The old man looked at her, his eyes softening. "Thank you, my daughter. What is your name?" "Aisha," she replied. He nodded. "You have a kind heart, Aisha. May God bless you." As the old man ate in silence, the door to the restaurant suddenly swung open. A tall, well-dressed man in a navy blue suit walked in. He had the air of someone important, and the customers immediately recognized him. "Is that Mr. Femi?" someone whispered. "Yes, the CEO of one of the biggest companies in Lagos," another murmured. Madame Ronke quickly straightened her dress and forced a smile. "Welcome, sir. What brings you here?" But Mr. Femi ignored her. His sharp eyes scanned the restaurant, until they landed on the old man. "Papa," he called out. The entire restaurant froze. Aisha's eyes widened. "Papa?" The old man looked up and smiled. "My son." Aisha's heart pounded in her chest. The man she had just defended, the man Madame Ronke had humiliated, was the father of one of the richest CEOs in Lagos. And from the look on Mr. Femi's face, he had seen and heard everything. The air in the restaurant turned thick with silence. Every eye was on Mr. Femi, the wealthy CEO, and his father, the same elderly man Aisha had just defended. Madame Ronke's fake smile faltered. Her hands trembled slightly as she stepped forward. "Yes, sir, I didn't know he was your father." Mr. Femi's sharp gaze snapped to her. "So if he wasn't my father, it would be okay to treat him like trash?" Madame Ronke stammered. "And no, sir, I just—" He raised a hand, silencing her. Then he turned to his father, his expression softening. "Papa, what are you doing here? Why didn't you tell me you were coming?" The old man wiped his mouth gently with a napkin. "Because I wanted to see the real world, my son. Not the one behind your office doors, but the world where ordinary people live." His voice was calm, but his words carried weight. Aisha stood frozen, watching the exchange. Her heart pounded as she realized what this meant. She had helped this old man, without knowing who he was. And now, the most powerful man in the room had witnessed her kindness. Mr. Femi's expression turned cold as he faced Madame Ronke. "You humiliated an elderly man for simply wanting food. A man who did nothing to deserve it. How many others have you treated this way?" Madame Ronke's face was pale. "Sir, please, You don't need to explain," he interrupted. "I will make sure no one ever eats at this place again." Gasps filled the room. The customers murmured among themselves, some glaring at Madame Ronke in disgust. The restaurant owner fell to her knees. "Sir, please. This is my only business. I didn't know." "You didn't know, but Aisha did," Mr. Femi said, his voice steady. "She treated him with kindness, while you treated him like dirt." Madame Ronke turned desperately to Aisha, her eyes pleading. "Please, Aisha, tell him I'm a good person. I gave you this job, didn't I?" Aisha swallowed hard. She wasn't a cruel person. But she couldn't lie. "You've always treated me unfairly," she said softly. "And you treat customers based on how much money they have. That's not right." Mr. Femi nodded. "That's all I needed to hear." He pulled out his phone. "By tomorrow, this restaurant will be shut down." Madame Ronke wailed. But no one moved to defend her. Because deep down, they all knew, she had brought this on herself. After a few moments of silence, the old man turned to Aisha. "My daughter," he said, his voice gentle. "Why did you help me?" Aisha hesitated, unsure how to answer. Because it was the right thing to do. No one deserves to be treated that way, sir." Mr. Femi studied her for a long time before nodding. "People like you are rare." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. "Come to my office tomorrow morning." Aisha's eyes widened. "Sir? My father is right. You have a kind heart. I want someone like you working for me." Her breath caught in her throat. "Why, you mean, a job?" He smiled slightly. "Not just any job. Something better than this. Something that matches your worth." Aisha felt like she was dreaming. Just this morning, she had been struggling to make ends meet. And now, the CEO of one of the biggest companies in Lagos was offering her a job. Tears stung her eyes. "Thank you, sir. I don't know what to say." "Just be at my office tomorrow," he said. The old man smiled at her. "You helped me when you had nothing to gain. That is true kindness." Aisha felt warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen. As the customers slowly returned to their meals, Aisha sat down, feeling the weight of what had just happened. She had stood up for what was right. And in doing so, she had changed her own life. Madame Ronke sat in the corner, defeated, as Aisha removed her apron. Tomorrow, everything would change. She had no idea what the future held, but one thing was certain: this was the start of something new. And for the first time in years, she dared to hope. Aisha barely slept that night. She lay on the thin mattress in her small room, staring at the ceiling, her heart pounding with excitement and nervousness. Could this really be happening? She whispered to herself. She turned her head to look at her mother, who was sleeping soundly in the corner of the room. Mama had been sick for months, and Aisha had struggled to afford her medication. If this job opportunity worked out, she could finally give her mother a better life. By dawn, she was up, ironing the only decent outfit she owned, a simple blue blouse and black skirt. She tied her hair neatly and took a deep breath. "This is my chance," she whispered. "I can't mess this up." Aisha arrived at Femi Group Enterprises, a towering glass building in the heart of Lagos. She hesitated at the entrance, suddenly feeling small compared to the grand structure. "Excuse me, miss," the receptionist greeted, giving her a curious look. "Can I help you?" Aisha swallowed hard. I have an appointment with Mr. Femi." The receptionist's eyes widened slightly. "Mr. Femi?" "Yes, he asked me to come." After a quick call to confirm, the receptionist smiled. "Go to the 10th floor. His assistant will meet you there." Aisha stepped into the elevator, her heart racing. When the doors opened, a woman in a sleek suit was waiting for her. "Are you Aisha?" the woman asked. "Yes, ma. I'm Clara, Mr. Femi's personal assistant. Follow me." Aisha was led into a grand office with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. And there, behind a large desk, was Mr. Femi himself. He looked up from his laptop and smiled. "Aisha. You came." "Yes, sir," she said, trying to steady her voice. "Please, sit." She took a seat, clutching her hands together nervously. "You helped my father without knowing who he was. You stood up against injustice even when it could cost you your job," Mr. Femi said. "That kind of integrity is rare." Aisha held her breath. "I want to offer you a job in my company," he continued. "Not as a waitress. Something bigger." Her eyes widened. "A real job?" He nodded. "You'll start as my personal assistant in training. It won't be easy, but I believe you have the potential to grow." Aisha felt tears welling in her eyes. "Sir. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Mr. Femi said with a smile. She nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. Yes." Aisha's first day was overwhelming. She had to learn how to schedule meetings, handle phone calls, and assist with important documents. She made mistakes, lots of them. She accidentally spilled coffee on her desk, mixed up meeting times, and struggled with the office computer. At one point, Clara sighed. "Aisha, are you sure you can handle this?" Aisha felt embarrassed but squared her shoulders. "I'll learn, ma. Just give me time." Mr. Femi overheard and smiled. That's the spirit. Though she was struggling, she refused to give up. Meanwhile, back at the restaurant, Madame Ronke was facing the consequences of her actions. After Mr. Femi's public warning, her business had collapsed. Customers had stopped coming, and negative reviews spread like wildfire. She sat in her empty restaurant, staring at the door, regretting everything. "If only I had treated people better," she whispered. Little did she know, Aisha's life had changed forever. Aisha was determined not to let her lack of experience hold her back. Each day, she arrived at the office before sunrise, studying everything she could about business management, scheduling, and handling clients. But the learning curve was steep. One morning, as she carefully carried a tray of coffee into Mr. Femi's office, she tripped over the carpet. The hot coffee spilled all over an important document. Aisha's heart dropped. Clara, who had been watching, gasped. "Aisha, do you know how important that file is?" Aisha scrambled to clean it up, her hands shaking. I'm so sorry." Mr. Femi sighed but didn't raise his voice. Instead, he leaned back in his chair. "Aisha, do you know why I hired you?" She swallowed. "Because I helped your father." He shook his head. "That was part of it. But I hired you because I saw something in you, determination, honesty, and the ability to learn. Mistakes will happen, but what matters is how you handle them." Aisha took a deep breath and nodded. "I'll do better, sir." He smiled. "Good. Now, go print another copy of that file." She rushed out, determined to prove herself worthy of this opportunity. A few weeks later, the elderly man, Mr. Femi's father, visited the office. This time, he wasn't wearing his old, simple clothes. Instead, he was dressed in a fine traditional outfit. When Aisha saw him, she immediately stood up and greeted him. "Ah, my daughter," the old man said warmly. "How is work treating you?" Aisha smiled. "It's hard, but I'm learning, sir." He chuckled. "I knew you would. You have the heart of a strong woman." He turned to Mr. Femi. "My son, this girl is special. Don't let her go." Mr. Femi nodded. "I won't, Papa. She's already proving her worth." Aisha felt a swell of pride. She was no longer just a struggling waitress, she was becoming someone important. A month later, a huge opportunity came. A top investor was coming to the company for a presentation, and Clara was supposed to handle it. But at the last minute, she fell sick. Mr. Femi turned to Aisha. "Can you do it?" Her eyes widened. "Me? But sir, I've never done anything like this before." He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I believe in you." Aisha took a deep breath. She had no choice but to step up. She spent the whole night preparing, watching videos, and practicing in front of the mirror. The next day, as she stood in front of the investor, her hands trembled slightly. But when she began speaking, her voice grew stronger. She explained the company's vision, goals, and how their business could benefit the investor. By the time she finished, there was silence in the room. Then, applause. The investor turned to Mr. Femi and nodded. "I'm impressed. Your assistant is sharp." Aisha couldn't believe it. She had done it. Meanwhile, Madame Ronke's restaurant had closed completely. She sat outside the locked doors, staring at the empty street. She had been proud and arrogant, but now she had nothing. One of her former employees walked by and shook his head. "Aisha used to work for you, and now she's in a big company. Imagine if you had treated her better." Madame Ronke covered her face with her hands. She had lost everything because of her own cruelty. But Aisha? Aisha was just getting started. 2 months after her successful presentation, Aisha's name became well known in the company. She was no longer just the girl who helped the CEO's father, she had become a valuable employee. One morning, as she was arranging documents, Mr. Femi called her into his office. She walked in nervously. "Sir, you called me?" He smiled. "Yes. I have an important announcement." Aisha's heart pounded. "I've been watching your growth, Aisha. You have improved in so many ways: your confidence, your intelligence, your ability to handle pressure. And because of that, I want to offer you a full-time position as my official personal assistant." Aisha's jaw dropped. "Sir. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Mr. Femi said with a grin. Aisha swallowed her emotions and nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." Tears welled in her eyes. This wasn't just a job, it was a life-changing opportunity. She had gone from a struggling waitress to the assistant of one of the most powerful men in Lagos. And all because she had chosen kindness. The first thing Aisha did with her new salary was take her mother to a proper hospital. The doctors examined Mama and started her on the best treatment available. For the first time in years, her mother's eyes were bright with hope. "My daughter," Mama whispered as Aisha sat by her hospital bed. "You have made me so proud." Aisha smiled. "Mama, we are never going to suffer again." And she meant it. One afternoon, as Aisha was leaving work, she saw a familiar face standing near the company gate. It was Madame Ronke. But she was no longer the proud, loud woman Aisha remembered. She looked tired, thinner, and broken. When their eyes met, Madame Ronke looked down, ashamed. "Aisha," she said in a quiet voice. "Can I talk to you?" Aisha hesitated but nodded. Madame Ronke sighed deeply. "I lost everything. After what happened that day, people stopped coming to my restaurant. My reputation was destroyed." Aisha listened without speaking. I just wanted to say I'm sorry," Madame Ronke said. Her voice cracked with emotion. "I treated you badly. I treated everyone badly. And now, I have nothing left." Aisha took a deep breath. The old her would have hated Madame Ronke forever. But she wasn't the same girl anymore. She had learned that forgiveness was power. "I forgive you," Aisha said gently. Madame Ronke looked up, shocked. "You do?" "Yes. But I hope you have learned your lesson." Tears filled Madame Ronke's eyes. "I have, Aisha. I really have." With that, she turned and walked away, her shoulders heavy with regret. Aisha watched her go, feeling free. A year later, Aisha had climbed even higher in the company. She had gone from a personal assistant to a business development officer. Her salary was more than she had ever dreamed of. She had rented a beautiful apartment for herself and her mother. She even started a small foundation to help struggling young girls find jobs, because she knew what it meant to have nothing. One evening, as she stood on the balcony of her apartment, she looked out at the city lights. She thought about her journey, the humiliation, the struggles, the kindness that had led her here. She smiled to herself. She was proof that good things happen to good people. And this? This was just the beginning. And so, Aisha's kindness changed her life forever. She rose from a struggling waitress to a powerful woman. Meanwhile, the one who humiliated the elderly man? She lost everything. A true lesson that the way we treat people today can shape our tomorrow. Tell me, if you were in Aisha's shoes, would you have helped the old man? Let me know in the comments. If this story inspired you, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more amazing folktales that will change the way you see the world. Until next time, remember, kindness is power.